What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. How is everybody doing today? I hope everybody is doing well. Anyway, today my video is going to be an extension from my previous video, and it's about this book called Conspirators Hierarchy: The Committee of 300. It is written by John Coleman back in 1991, and what the book is all about is basically is saying that there is a committee made up of around 300 people, and they mostly came from the elites, the politicians, the bankers, and royal families, and so on. Okay, that they have this secret plan, and he found the secret plan because he was previously a British MI6 agent, and he found these leaked documents. And many critics have said that he is not a real agent, and that probably they said that he has been debunked and so on. But I tend to believe him because many of the prediction he made based off the leaked document that he received has become true. Okay, and I'm talking about prediction that no one would have thought of to begin with. Okay, it's like Trump running president. Somebody predicted back in 1992 that Donald Trump will become the president of the US. Everybody will be like, yeah, that will never happen, right? Yeah, stuff like that. Okay. So without any further ado, let's start our video. Oh, before we start our video, if you like this type of content, not content, content, kindly please subscribe to my channel and like the video and leave some comments. So let's get started. So I left off with this bullet point: full support for supranational bodies, UN, IMF, etc., etc. over national ones. Okay, the example that Grok gave is US/EU funding to WHO, 6 billion plus annually. WHO's pandemic treaty push 2024 negotiations. And then another example is UN's influence on national policies. For example, Sustainable Development Goal Policy Compliance, or known as SDG, IMF bailouts with strings attached. For example, at Argentina 2022. So where do we start? Okay, I'm going to start with IMF. No, I'm going to start by saying that UN's influence, I'm not a fan of UN, by the way. I'm not a fan of IMF, WHO, and whatever. But UN's influence on national policies, for example, Sustainable Development Goal, which has already been covered in my previous episode, check that out, okay? And next one in line is IMF bailout with strings attached, Argentina 2022. Okay. Now, I just want to make this point. There is no country on earth that has become rich by following the IMF advice. Okay. In fact, we have multiple evidence that shows countries can become rich very quickly if they do the exact opposite of IMF advice. Case in point, Japan, South Korea, China, Taiwan, Singapore. They became rich very quickly, and none of them listened to IMF advice. In fact, they did the opposite of what the IMF advised. South Korea did follow IMF advice back in 1998, but for decades, they did not follow the IMF advice, and because of that, they become rich. Okay. What is some examples of countries that followed IMF advice? Well, Africa is the biggest example. Many African nations become dirt poor to the point they become basket case countries thanks to following IMF severe austerity policies. Not just IMF, by the way, IMF and World Bank, okay? We look at Greece, okay? Greece could have easily achieve economic recovery pretty quickly if the government just liquidate their banks, okay? But no, the IMF wouldn't allow it. Okay, Greece was desperate for cash at that time. Okay, because they are on the verge of bankruptcy. And in order for you to get these IMF loans, they put a condition that Greece has to do severe economic austerity measures. Okay, which means that Greece has to cut expenses, cut expenses on welfare, infrastructure investment, medicine, education, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the result is their economy ends up getting worse, not getting better. Okay, the same could be said for Argentina. Okay, they have to go through the same economic austerity measures. And how many years already Argentina is still in a crisis? They just recently got bailed out by the US government for $40 billion. That is another thing that is probably worth covering in the future. When they could easily get out of this crisis by liquidating their banks. Liquidating their banks, and they don't need to do severe austerity measures. But no, of course, the IMF doesn't want a quick uh, economic recovery. They purposely want to prolong this recession. I am not saying that African countries, Greece and Argentina and so on, are not corrupt. I am not saying that they are such a bloody efficient government. They're not. Okay, not even close. But how is it that putting severe austerity measures is going to help them achieve recovery? When there is a recession, that is the time when government should spend more. You should quickly build up infrastructure and so on, because in a way you support the economy. If you build, for example, you build roads and bridges, you're going to help the engineering companies. They're going to need more engineers. They're going to hire more engineers. For example, if let's say the government, they purposely bought a lot of pens, okay, purposely bought a lot of pens and stockpile it, so many manufacturer that produces pens will start hiring people again. That's how you achieve economic recovery. The government helps to a certain extent. And then when you cut some of these measures, like the IMF are telling Greece and Argentina to um, cut pension payment, how is that helping the economy? When you cut pension payment and you cut civil servant salaries, you're gonna create a shrinking domestic consumption. So in other ways, you're gonna unnecessarily prolong the economic recession. There are many more examples I can give, which is a head scratcher from the IMF. Okay, but the idea that IMF is here to promote economic stability is nonsense. Okay, the IMF purposely want poor countries to forever become poor. Because of what? Because poor countries is easier to dominate. That's the truth. And as I was saying, this is all just a plan in order for them one day when they are ready to fully implement the one world government agendas, everything will be in place. Okay. So let's go to the next bullet point. Worldwide terrorist network with negotiation as policy, rise of ISIS Al Qaeda post 2001, US drone strikes and talks, Taliban 2021, state sponsored groups like Hamas, CIA's alleged role in Mujahideen 1980s declassified, global terror deaths peak at 44K in 2014. Now, the whole world was saying to the US, don't go to war with Iraq. Well, except for Israel, of course. But let's not forget that Benjamin Netanyahu went to Congress and speak how he wants 7 countries, no, 5 countries. He wants the US to invade 5 countries and topple their government. We're talking about Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Lebanon. I'm just quoting this at the top of my mind, but I believe those were the 5 countries. And magically, all those 5 countries, the government has been, except for Iran, the government has been successfully toppled magically, right? Whatever Benjamin Netanyahu wants, Benjamin Netanyahu gets. Okay. Anyway, the whole world was already telling the US, do not go to war with Iraq. Okay. Americans were telling the government not to go to war with Iraq. Okay. First of all, what is the purpose of going to war with Iraq to begin with? Because of weapons of mass destruction. Well, 24 years later, where is the weapons of mass destruction? None in sight. Okay. So it was a war built on lies to begin with. Okay. But many people have already predicted that if you topple the Assad government, you're going to have an even worse government. Okay. Well, right now, it seems like they have somewhat of a stable government, but ISIS is still there. You know, are we supposed to forget that ISIS for years was causing havoc in the Middle East? Many people has already predicted that ISIS is going, groups like ISIS is going to rise. Okay. And of course, the US intelligence know all about this. Of course, they know. I mean, like, they have decades and decades of history of the result of toppling governments, and the result has never been good. But they continue with this, okay? And it's so predictable. Groups like ISIS is going to flourish. And to begin with, I don't even believe this ISIS and Al Qaeda group is actually Muslim extremists. I might cover this in the future, by the way. But for the sake of argument, for the sake of this video, let's just presume that they really are Muslim extremists, okay? Presuming that they are Muslim extremists, why do you still go to war with Iraq when, first of all, you don't have to? You like to go to war with Iraq. And secondly, we all have been predicting that this is going to happen. And now, does everybody remember that we were supposed to hate Al Qaeda? But now suddenly Trump is BFF with one of the former Al Qaeda leader Jolani, who is now in control of Syria. He is the president of Syria. President or prime minister, I'm not sure what they call it in Syria, but he is the head of state of Syria. So for decades we were supposed to hate Al Qaeda, but now we are supposed to welcome. I mean, like Jolani came to Washington DC, went to the White House, and have a good talk with Trump. Now we are supposed to believe that Jolani is supposed to be our, I mean, like the world's BFF, America's BFF. Sorry, guys. And sorry to say this, but Jolani is considered a good candidate to lead Syria, according to the US. But Assad is not a good candidate. When Assad was protecting the minority, the Christian minority and the Alawites. Jolani, on the hand, the moment he took over Syria, he persecuted the Christians and the Alawites. And we're supposed to believe that, oh, Assad is bad, but Jolani is good. I mean, like, come on. This is such a joke at this point, okay? And then the excuses they were giving that it is because of 9/11 and blah, 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 okay? Like, do people still believe 9/11 was caused by Muslim extremists? I mean, like, there were so many holes with the 9/11 theory. For for starter, Building 7 collapsed because of a fire debris. Like, are you kidding me? When I was 6 to 7 years old, I remember my neighbor, her house caught in fire. Okay. And it is a semi-detached house, and her house was on fire. But I remember correctly that the house next to it did not collapse, and the house itself did not collapse. We're not talking fire debris, okay? We're talking about like full-blown fire, okay? And this house that is not structurally as strong as Building 7 did not collapse. And yet you're supposed to tell me that this iron steel building, Building 7, collapsed because of a fire debris? The theory doesn't even make sense, okay? And then there is the theory that Larry Silverstein, who bought the World Trade Center several weeks before the 9/11 attacks, he specifically bought insurance covering acts of terrorism, and he and his daughter every single day have breakfast at the top of the tower, except for the date 9/11. Convenient? He also has a son that works at WTC. And yet on 9/11, all three of them were absent from work. And then we also have this theory that the FBI or the CIA, whoever it is, found passport. You know, this passport from Saudi Arabia. They found passport a couple of blocks from World Trade Center. So how can they find this passport a couple of blocks from World Trade Center? That doesn't even make sense. Like, are you saying that the person uh that was flying this jet, prior to the crash, he opened the windows and then threw his passport? Like, seriously? And then I've read some comments online. They were arguing and say like, oh, maybe because of the impact of that crash, probably the passport was thrown out of the plane. Okay. Well, to begin with, they found several passport. Okay. Not just one passport. I mean, like, even one passport being thrown out of the plane already doesn't make sense. But they found several passport. Like, are you joking me? We're talking about supposedly fire so strong that it can make the World Trade Center collapse. And yet this passport survived. Give me a break. Okay. And then there's also the story about dancing Israelis. Several Israelis being caught dancing and taping the 9/11 event. Okay. They were they were put what we call they were caught by the police, okay, because a woman reported seeing them celebrating 9/11, and they were caught by the police, and after a couple of questioning, I guess they were released. I mean, like, why are you releasing them to begin with? You know, especially since the excuse they give was that they were there to document the event. What do you even mean by document the event? How do you know to document the event to begin with? And why were you celebrating to begin with? And there was this couple of Israelis. They were later interviewed in Israeli television show. You can check it online, okay? They admitted this is not coming from me. This is from their own mouths. They admitted to documenting the event, and they admitted that they were jumping. Looks like they were celebrating anyway. So I don't buy it. And then some of these is excuses given, we need to topple this government in Libya, in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on, and instill democracy. I mean, like, I'm all for democracy, unlimited amount of democracy for developed countries, okay? But for poor countries, democracy doesn't work. We're talking about Iraq that was suffering from years of economic sanctions from literally the entire planet, okay? And you're telling me that people who are poor and desperate can act responsibly in a democratic society? No. There's no country on earth that has become from poor to rich by following the democratic system. Democracy usually follows when the country has already reached developed level. So democracy doesn't work, and you can see the results that was being produced in the Middle East after all this government was toppled and introduced by a supposedly democratic government when they're not even democratic at all. But we have seen that all of the results has been a complete catastrophe. Anyway, let's move on to the next. This is the last bullet point, by the way. Control and destroy education. Common Core outcome-based education, DEI mandates declining literacy. 54% of US adults below sixth grade level. Wow, I'm not even aware that it is that bad right now. UNESCO Global Education Standards, rise of work curriculum, criticized for indoctrination. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't believe in indoctrination in school, okay? I don't believe in discussion of ideology at all in school, okay? Kids should learn basic stuff like languages, like math, science, history, and that's where it should stop, okay? I don't like this ideology brainwashing of the young that is going on in many countries in the world right now, okay? You are radicalizing children at a very young age. Once they reach adulthood, if they want to do their own research, you know, they want to learn and they want to educate themselves about different ideologies, that's their business, okay? I don't like this brainwashing and then this rise of woke curriculum. I mean, like, there are people who are these days saying that they identify themselves as a cat, as a dog. I mean, like 50 years ago, if you said you identify yourself as a cat, people will say, "Are you kidding yourself? You need to go to a mental institution." But these days, it's been taught in school that it's okay. You can say that. If you believe that you're a cat, then you're a cat. Are you joking me? You are enabling mental health crisis. Okay, I don't care what people say, but if you enable children to think that they are not something that they are what they are born with, then you are enabling them to become mentally unhealthy. Anyway, oh, and then I've heard, I mean, like, I don't live in the West, but I have heard this. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I do have friends who live in the West these days. And they were saying that in schools, they are brainwashing children to do sex operations. I mean, like some school, they can even what do we call? They can even overrule parents. If let's say the student say, I am. If let's say the student is born a man, a boy, and then he said, I identify myself as a girl. Okay, the teacher can set up like what we call sex operation procedures or hormone what do we call hormone therapy, not hormone therapy, hormone hormone procedures. I mean, like, first of all, who are you to overrule parents? Okay, any decision should come from the parents, and over something as serious as sex change, I don't think even parents should have the decision to make it on behalf of their children. Once they have reached 18 years old, they have become adult. If they want to do sex operation, that's their business. Okay? I mean, like, I have nothing against trans people, transsexual people. I mean, like, hey, it's not my business. You guys do whatever you want. I don't care. Okay? But I do have a problem if you try to change their sex before they reach 18. Because before they reach 18, their brain is not developed yet. You know, when I was a little girl and when I was a little boy, I actually wanted to be a girl. you know, I started dressing in woman's clothing. I was playing with handbags, makeups, and so on behind my parents' back, by the way, and so on. And at that age, 6 years old, I really thought I want to be a girl. But now, being an adult, I mean, like, I never want to transition. I am proud to be a man and I am comfortable being a man, okay? Never want to be a woman at all. So imagine if my parents did sex operation to me at that age, knowing what I know now, that I would never want to be a woman. Don't you think that would be like mentally ruin me? That's why I said nobody should have the power to make decision about somebody's body, especially when it comes to something like a sex operation. Children, even children should not be able to make that decision. Once you reach 18, you can do whatever you want with your body. But before that, no. And then it also mentions this DEI mandates. You know, I mean, like, I don't know much about affirmative actions, but what I have seen from my limited reading is that the results is mixed, and to me, it's just common sense. Okay, I mean, like, I used to work in the HR department of a large factory. Okay, and the government was pushing for more women in IT. Okay, I mean, like, it's just common sense to me. Okay, do you want to be served, if you want to have a medical operation, do you want to be served by the best doctor, or do you want to be served by a less qualified doctor simply because you want to be nice? Simply because, let's say, oh, we don't have enough black doctors, even though he is not qualified for the job, we have to take him because we need to fulfill this quota. Do you want to be a quota filler to begin with? I mean, I would be embarrassed to be a quota filler. And I hate this 30% quota for women, okay? 30% quota in board of director, 30% quota for women in IT and so on. If you're not qualified to be there to begin with, don't don't accept the job, okay? I mean, like, why can't we just pick the best candidate, period? It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, Asian, doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman, gay or straight or whatever. Why can't we be like that? I mean, like, if you have to lower your standard just to be nice, you know that your company is not gonna be run efficiently. And if this policies is being implemented on a national level, then you know the quality of the industry of that country is going to go down. DEI doesn't help, okay? I mean, like, DEI is a shortcut um solution. And when you use shortcut solutions, initially it will be good, but in the long run, it will become worse and worse. That's always the result, you know. To me, progress from different races can be done if there is no government intervention at all. It's going to take time, okay? If there is no DEI, believe me, uh, black people, Hispanic, or in my cases, I'm from Malaysia, okay? And we also have affirmative actions, okay? And it is specifically targeting for the Malays. The Chinese and the Indians, they are being discriminated by these affirmative action policies, similar to how Asians and whites are being discriminated against black and Hispanic people due to the affirmative actions policies. Okay, and as I have said before, affirmative action helps in the initial beginning. But as time goes by, it doesn't help. In fact, it makes things worse because after a while, people become complacent. When it's easier for you to enter just because of your skin colors, you don't work as hard as the other race. When you're being artificially put into the top institution, even though you're not qualified to begin with, you're gonna struggle a lot, you know? If let's say people who um, enter Harvard, for example, if let's say the average IQ of the students who entered the course at the Harvard program has an average IQ of 120, and you have an average IQ of 100, but because they need to to fill some quota, you were artificially being put there, even though you are not qualified to be there. The Not only is it not fair because you're not qualified to be there to begin with, not fair to the other races, but you're also gonna have to struggle a lot, okay? Because when the professor is teaching students who are significantly higher IQ than you, they're gonna teach it at a far higher rate than you can catch up. And the result is many of these people that was being put there artificially, they end up quitting, and they end up picking. If they don't quit, they probably will switch course to, let's say, previously they were doing engineering courses, and because they cannot catch up, they have to do, maybe something a little lighter like philosophy or history or so on. When if you were being put into a university that is less competitive but still reputable, for example, like maybe UCLA, or maybe you were being put in, I don't know, University of Northwestern, which is still very reputable university, but it's not Harvard level reputable. When you instead of going to Harvard, where you would probably end up not being able to catch up with the curriculum, and you ended up having to switch to other courses that will pay you less. If you go into philosophy or history, where the salary will be much lower once you graduate, instead of going there, you could have gone to UCLA and do engineering job and do engineering degree, finish the degree, and you would graduate and work as an engineer, getting paid a lot more than somebody with, let's say, a philosophy course graduate. So I don't believe that affirmative action helps at all. And I have seen it, okay, with my own eyes. In Malaysia also we have affirmative actions. I don't think affirmative actions helps in the long run, okay? Anyway, and then there's declining literacy, 54% of US adults below 6th grade level. I noticed these days that a lot of people are finding it difficult to read. They find it difficult to focus. I have that too, by the way. Sometimes when I read, I have to read it double, triple time in order for it to finally stick into my brain. You know, we have this attention deficit hyper disorder stuff. A lot of people do have that problem, and Candace always was saying something which I find very interesting. She said YouTube brain, where they can even focus watching a 5 minute videos. And yeah, that is true. You know, I also have the same stuff. Sometimes after 5 minutes, then my mind goes all over the place. I was like, oh my god, okay, I need to get back to this video. You know, we don't even know what's being put into our body, the food, the vaccines, and all this stuff. The medicine that were given to us since we were uh, kids. We don't even know how harmful it is to our brains. And the result is 54% US adults below 6th grade level literacy rate. Ridiculous. And the government is not even alarmed about it. I mean, like, instead of focusing on giving a good language lesson at public schools, focusing more on maths and science, what they're doing instead? Woke curriculum. How is that going to help society? How is that going to help your country become competitive with other countries? You see the education system in Japan, and then you compare that to the West. You know, Japan with their extremely competitive nature, especially in maths and science, and then you come to the US, where only 54% of US no, you come to the US where 54% of US adults below 6th grade level. Right now, the US economy is still doing well because, well, you can always steal talent from overseas, right? And also, the US education system used to be good for a very long time, and only recently it has gone like downhill, I believe. I don't know if this is true or not, but this is from what I have heard from my friends who live in several Western countries. Okay, it used to be good, but it has become bad. Mhm. It has become bad. So right now, the US is still competitive strictly due to the legacy of the previous education system. In the coming generations, what will the result be when you see that 54% US adults below 6th grade level literacy? That is very scary, you see. Now, I feel like there is a movement right now to absolutely destroy the Western civilization. They already destroyed the Middle East civilization beyond repair. Okay, at this point, it is beyond repair, at least for the next few decades. Now it's time for the Western world to face the same medicine. Okay, and now I swear to God, I saw an article from some rabbi. I don't know, I forgot the name of the rabbi, but I swear I saw this article. I read the article. They were saying that, oh, now the JEWS can no longer rely on the West due to increased anti-Semitism sentiment. Now we are going to have to focus on Asia. So they're going to ditch the West for Asia. Do remember that JEWS flourished in the Middle East, for thousands of years. Okay. But the moment the Middle East is no longer useful for them, they ditch the Middle East for the West. Okay. Now, for hundreds of years, they flourish under Western rule. Okay. But now they're like, oh, okay, we no longer need you. Now we're going to ditch you for Asia. My guess is their next stop will be China. Why do you think the US government back in the sorry guys, back in the 90s and early 2000s, the US politicians were going all out to promote outsourcing into China, manufacturing outsourcing into China. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Okay. Why would you want to destroy your own economy and then outsource it to another country? It doesn't make sense at all. Okay. So, what's their motive? As I was saying, the West is no longer useful. So now we're gonna need China um, to continue our agenda. Think of it. 1.4 billion 1.4 billion people living under communist rule, who are used to live under communist rule. Sorry guys, I don't know if you listen, if you can hear that or not, but just now there was someone that was walking, passing by my car, and he was talking extremely loud, so I have to pause for a little while. Okay, so I was talking about China, 1.5 billion people living under communist rule, and they are used to listen to live under dictatorship rule. Okay, they don't question what the government asks them to do. Mm-hmm. So don't you think again, don't you think this will be useful for the antichrist system? Just something to think about, right? I mean, like, the Middle East and the US, they have always been rebellious. They have always been untrustworthy of the government. Okay. So that's why they, and you know who I am talking about when I say they, I have to be careful because these days a lot of lawsuits is coming to a podcaster. So I have to be careful with what I say, okay? You know what I mean when I say they can no longer rely on the Middle East and the West because they know at some point the Arabs and the West, they are going to rebel when they saw that this antichrist system is being built. So who will be their best ally? The Chinese. The Chinese doesn't even believe in antichrist. They don't even care. So just think of that. Anyway, I've been rambling for too long. If you like my video, kindly like my video and subscribe and leave some comment. My next video will be I'm planning to do on Saudi Arabia and Wahhabism. So if you like this type of content, kindly subscribe to my channel. Okay guys, bye bye.